Welcome, fellow wasteland wanderer, to a journey through time itself. Tonight, we're going to explore the complete timeline of the Fallout universe, from the divergent world of the 1940s all the way through to the distant future of 2296. This is a story that spans centuries, filled with vaults and wasteland wanderers, super mutants and synths, the rise and fall of civilizations in a world forever changed by nuclear fire. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we walk together through this post-apocalyptic world. We'll move slowly and steadily through each era, each game, each moment that shaped the wasteland we know and love. There's no rush here, no need to memorize every detail. Just let the story wash over you like the gentle glow of a Pip-Boy in the darkness. This is the complete story of Fallout. So close your eyes when you're ready, and let's begin our journey through the atomic age and beyond. Our story begins in a world that looks remarkably similar to our own in the years following the end of World War II. It's 1945, and the atomic bombs have just fallen on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bringing the war to its devastating conclusion. The world is war-weary but hopeful, looking toward a future powered by the atom, that miraculous force that ended the greatest conflict in human history. But somewhere between 1945 and 1961, something changes. The world of Fallout begins to diverge from our own timeline, taking a different path through history. Where our world embraced the space age and the cultural revolutions of the 1960s, the Fallout world becomes frozen in time, locked in the aesthetic and ideological framework of the 1950s. Picture, if you will, a world where the optimism of the atomic age never faded, where the clean lines of 1950s design became the template for all future technology, where the social structures, the fashion, the very way people spoke remained locked in that post-war era of atomic optimism and Cold War paranoia. This is the world of Fallout, a retro-futuristic paradise built on the dreams and fears of the Eisenhower era. The Vietnam War still happens in this timeline, much as it did in our own world. American soldiers still march through the jungles of Southeast Asia in the mid-1960s, and the tensions of the Cold War still grip the world. But instead of the Soviet Union serving as America's primary antagonist, it's communist China that becomes the great enemy, the red specter that haunts American dreams and drives technological innovation. This divergence creates a world that's both familiar and alien. The cars are still rounded and chrome-laden, the robots still have that delightfully retro aesthetic, and the nuclear family remains the idealized cornerstone of society. But beneath this veneer of atomic optimism lurks a paranoia and militarism that will ultimately consume the world. As we move into the 2040s and 2050s, we see the emergence of the corporate titans that will define the pre-war world. Chief among these is Vault-Tec, a company that begins as a simple construction firm but grows to become the most powerful corporation in America. Their rise is meteoric, fueled by government contracts and the growing fear of nuclear annihilation. Vault-Tec's success story is the American dream taken to its logical extreme. What starts as a modest proposal to build fallout shelters becomes a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that shapes government policy and determines the fate of millions. Their vaults, marketed as the ultimate insurance policy against nuclear war, become symbols of both American ingenuity and American anxiety. But Vault-Tec isn't alone in this corporate landscape. Robco Industries, founded by the brilliant Robert House, becomes the leader in robotics and computing technology. House himself is a fascinating figure. Born in 2020, he represents the pinnacle of pre-war technological achievement. His company produces the protectrons that guard facilities, the sentry bots that patrol borders, and most importantly, the Pip-Boy devices that become the lifeline of vault dwellers everywhere. The Pip-Boy, that iconic wrist-mount computer, represents everything wonderful and terrible about pre-war technology. It's a marvel of engineering, capable of monitoring health, managing inventory, and even playing holotapes. But it's also a symbol of dependence, a technological leash that keeps its users connected to a system that ultimately fails them. Robert House's other great creation is Liberty Prime, the giant robot that embodies American military might and propaganda. Standing tall and proud, spouting patriotic slogans while wielding nuclear weapons, Liberty Prime is perhaps the perfect symbol of pre-war America. Powerful, bombastic, and ultimately destructive. These corporations don't just make products, they shape culture. Their advertisements promise a future of atomic cars and robot servants, of clean nuclear energy and push-bottom convenience. They sell the American people a vision of tomorrow that's both seductive and terrifying. A world where technology solves every problem while creating new ones. The political landscape of pre-war America undergoes radical changes as the nuclear age progresses. Faced with the growing threat of communism and the logistical challenges of governing an increasingly complex society, the United States makes the dramatic decision to reorganize itself from 50 states into 13 commonwealths. This restructuring isn't just administrative, it's ideological. The 13 commonwealths represent a return to America's colonial roots, a simplification of governance that's supposed to make the country more efficient and easier to defend. Each commonwealth is designed to be more or less self-sufficient, capable of maintaining order and continuing government functions, even in the event of nuclear attack. The Commonwealth system works, after a fashion. None of the 13 regions fall to communist influence, and the country maintains its democratic institutions right up until the end. But the reorganization also creates new tensions and rivalries. The Commonwealths begin to compete with each other for resources and federal funding, creating the kind of internal strife that weakens the nation from within. This political volatility breeds a culture of paranoia and suspicion. McCarthyism never really ends in the Fallout timeline. Instead, it evolves and intensifies. Communist sympathizers are rooted out of every institution. Loyalty oaths become commonplace, and the government begins to view its own citizens with increasing suspicion. The America of 2077 is a nation that's won the Cold War, but lost its soul in the process. The military-industrial complex grows ever more powerful during this period, fed by contracts for increasingly exotic weapons and defense systems. The development of power armor begins as a response to the changing nature of warfare, but it becomes a symbol of American technological supremacy. These hulking suits of mechanized armor represent the evolution of the American soldier from citizen warrior to technological Superman. By 2052, the optimistic promises of the atomic age have begun to ring hollow. The clean, unlimited energy that was supposed to power the world forever has proven to be neither clean nor unlimited. Nuclear power has its place, but the world still runs on oil, and the oil is running out. The resource wars begin not with a declaration or a formal conflict, but with a gradual escalation of tensions over increasingly scarce petroleum reserves. Europe, facing an energy crisis that threatens to destroy its post-war recovery, makes the fateful decision to invade the Middle East. Their goal is simple: secure the oil reserves that will keep their civilization running for another generation. Meanwhile, in the Western Hemisphere, the United States begins its own campaign of expansion. Mexico is invaded and absorbed, its oil fields and agricultural resources integrated into the American economy. Canada follows soon after, annexed with relatively little resistance. The official rhetoric speaks of continental unity and mutual defense, but the reality is simpler. America needs resources, and it's willing to take them by force. The most significant theater of the resource wars is Alaska, where American forces face off against the Chinese military. This conflict, which will be remembered as the Sino-American War, represents the final phase of the Cold War, taken to its logical extreme. Both sides pour enormous resources into the Alaskan front, developing new weapons and tactics in the frozen wilderness. The war in Alaska becomes a testing ground for American power armor technology. These mechanized suits, originally designed for construction work in hazardous environments, are adapted for combat use. The sight of American soldiers marching through the snow in their T-45 and T-51 power armor becomes an iconic image of American might, broadcast around the world as proof of technological superiority. But the resource wars aren't just about oil and territory. They're about the fundamental question of how civilization will survive in a world of scarcity. The old assumptions about unlimited growth and endless prosperity have been shattered, replaced by a zero-sum mentality where one nation's gain must come at another's expense. This shift in thinking sets the stage for the ultimate catastrophe that's about to unfold. As the world teeters on the brink of nuclear war, a shadow organization known as the Enclave begins to take shape within the highest levels of the American government. Composed of politicians, military leaders, and corporate executives, the Enclave represents the darkest aspects of pre-war American power. They see the coming nuclear conflict not as a tragedy to be prevented, but as an opportunity to be exploited. The Enclave's vision is both grandiose and horrifying. They believe that nuclear war is inevitable, perhaps even necessary, to cleanse the world of weakness and create a new order dominated by what they consider to be the purest examples of American genetic stock. In their twisted ideology, the coming apocalypse isn't an end, but a beginning, the first day of a new world where they will reign supreme. To achieve this vision, the Enclave begins working with Vault Tech and Robco on what's officially known as Project Safehouse. On paper, it's a humanitarian initiative designed to protect American civilians from nuclear attack. The plan calls for the construction of 122 underground vaults, each capable of housing 1,000 people for extended periods. These vaults are marketed to the public as the ultimate survival insurance, a way to ensure that American civilization will endure even the worst nuclear exchange. But the public face of Project Safehouse conceals a much darker purpose. The Enclave has no intention of actually saving the American people. Instead, they plan to use the vaults as laboratories for social and scientific experimentation. Each vault is designed not just to shelter its inhabitants, but to test them, to push them to their scientific and physical limits in the name of scientific advancement. The experiments planned for the vaults are both varied and horrifying. Some vaults are designed to test the effects of isolation and overcrowding. Others will experiment with social structures, pitting different groups against each other to see what emerges. Still others are planned as testing grounds for new technologies, from genetic modification to psychological conditioning. Only a handful of vaults, perhaps a dozen or so, are designed to actually function as advertised. These control vaults serve two purposes. They provide a baseline for comparison with the experimental vaults, and they ensure that at least some portion of the population will survive to serve the Enclave's post-war ambitions. The true scope of the vault experiments is staggering in both its ambition and its cruelty. Each vault represents a different hypothesis about human nature, a different test of how people respond to extreme circumstances. The Enclave's scientists approach these experiments with the cold detachment of researchers studying lab rats, viewing the vault dwellers not as human beings but as test subjects. Vault 12, built beneath the city that will become Necropolis, is designed to test the effects of radiation exposure. The vault's door is deliberately faulty, allowing radiation to seep in gradually over time. The inhabitants slowly transform into ghouls, their flesh rotting away while their minds remain intact. The experiment seeks to determine whether these mutated humans can maintain their intelligence and social structures despite their physical transformation. Vault 15 represents a different kind of social experiment. Its population is deliberately chosen to represent a wide variety of ideological backgrounds. Different races, religions, and political beliefs, all crammed together in a confined space. The experiment is designed to test whether diverse groups can coexist under stress, or whether they'll inevitably tear each other apart. Perhaps the most notorious of all the Vault experiments is Vault 111, though its true purpose won't be revealed until centuries later. This vault, built in the area that will become known as the Commonwealth, is designed to test cryogenic preservation technology. The inhabitants are told they're being decontaminated, but they're actually being frozen, preserved in suspended animation for an indefinite period. Other vaults experiment with more esoteric concepts. Some are designed to test the effects of isolation, sealing their inhabitants away from the outside world for generations. Others experiment with social hierarchies, dividing their populations into artificial castes to see how inequality develops in a closed system. Still others test the limits of human adaptability, subjecting their inhabitants to gradually changing environmental conditions. The most chilling aspect of these experiments isn't their cruelty, but their systematic nature. Each vault is carefully designed to test a specific hypothesis, with detailed protocols for observation and data collection. The Enclave approaches the destruction of human dignity with the same methodical precision they bring to weapons development. In the midst of this corporate conspiracy, we encounter Cooper Howard, a figure who embodies both the glamour and the moral corruption of pre-war America. Cooper is Hollywood royalty, a movie star who specializes in westerns and action films. He's the John Wayne of his era, the kind of actor who represents traditional American values and rugged individualism. But Cooper's real importance to our story lies not in his film career, but in his marriage to Barbara Howard, one of Vault-Tech's leading executives. Barb, as she's known, is deeply involved in Project Safehouse, helping to coordinate the Vault construction program and manage its public relations campaign. Through her, Cooper gets an inside look at the corporate machinery that's reshaping America. Initially, Cooper is happy to lend his celebrity status to Vault-Tech's marketing efforts. He appears in promotional materials for the Vaults, his famous smile and confident demeanor helping to sell the public on the idea of underground survival. One particularly memorable photo shoot featuring Cooper and his daughter helps create the iconic Vault Boy mascot, that cheerful thumbs-up figure that will become the face of Vault-Tech's brand. But as Cooper learns more about his wife's work, he begins to have doubts. The official story about the Vaults doesn't quite add up, and Cooper starts to notice inconsistencies in Vault-Tech's public statements. His natural charisma and good looks have made him successful in Hollywood, but they've also given him insights into how image can be used to conceal reality. Cooper's growing suspicions lead him into contact with a group of radicals who are working to expose Vault-Tech's true agenda. These activists have uncovered evidence of the Vault experiments, and they're trying to warn the public about what's really being planned. Cooper begins feeding them information, using his access to corporate boardrooms to gather intelligence about the Enclave's activities. The truth Cooper uncovers is more horrifying than he imagined. Not only are the vaults designed as laboratories for human experimentation, but Vault-Tec and the Enclave are actually planning to trigger the nuclear war themselves. They've concluded that atomic warfare is inevitable, and they want to control its timing to maximize their own advantage. Vault-Tec's marketing campaign for the Vault represents one of the most successful and morally bankrupt advertising efforts in human history. The company manages to convince millions of Americans to pay for the privilege of becoming unwitting test subjects, all while believing they're purchasing salvation. The campaign plays expertly on American anxieties about nuclear war. Television commercials show happy families enjoying their comfortable vault accommodations, safe from the radioactive wasteland above. Print advertisements emphasize the vault's high-tech amenities and robust construction, promising worry-free living for the atomic age. The selection process for vault admission is presented as an honor, a recognition of the applicant's value to American society. Vault-Tec carefully screens potential dwellers, but not for the reasons the public believes. Rather than selecting the best and brightest to preserve American civilization, the company is actually choosing subjects for specific experiments based on their psychological profiles and genetic characteristics. The marketing campaign also serves to normalize the idea of nuclear war by presenting vault living as a reasonable precaution rather than a desperate measure. Vault-Tec helps create a cultural mindset where atomic warfare seems manageable, even survivable. This psychological condition makes the public more accepting of aggressive foreign policies and military buildups. Celebrity endorsements play a crucial role in the campaign's success. Stars like Cooper Howard lend their credibility to Vault-Tec's promises, their familiar faces helping to make the unthinkable seem routine. The company also sponsors educational programs in schools, teaching children about radiation safety and nuclear preparedness in ways that make atomic war seem like just another natural disaster to be prepared for. Perhaps most insidiously, Vault-Tec's marketing campaign creates a sense of exclusivity around vault admission. Those who can't afford vault space or don't qualify for admission are subtly portrayed as less valuable, less deserving of survival. This social stratification serves the Enclave's purposes by creating a population that's already psychologically prepared to accept the idea that some lives are worth more than others. The morning of October 23rd, 2077, begins like any other day in pre-war America. People wake up in their suburban homes, grab their morning coffee, and prepare for another day of work and routine. Children head off to school, adults commute to their offices, and the great machinery of American civilization continues its steady, predictable operation. No one knows that in just a few hours, everything they've ever known will be reduced to radioactive ash. The exact sequence of events that triggers the Great War remains shrouded in mystery. What we know is that somewhere in the world, someone makes the decision to launch nuclear weapons. Perhaps it's a computer malfunction, a miscommunication, or a deliberate act of aggression. The specific cause hardly matters. What matters is that once the first missile launches, there's no stopping what follows. The nuclear exchange lasts exactly 2 hours. In 120 minutes, the superpowers of the world unleash their entire atomic arsenals upon each other. Thousands of warheads arc across the globe, their contrails drawing geometric patterns of death against the blue October sky. Cities that have stood for centuries are vaporized in seconds. Millions of people die instantly, their shadows burned into walls and sidewalks. The United States takes the brunt of the attack. Major cities from coast to coast disappear in nuclear fire. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, all are targeted for complete destruction. Military installations are hit repeatedly, ensuring that any organized resistance becomes impossible. The government's elaborate continuity plans prove worthless as communication networks fail and command structures evaporate. But the nuclear detonations are only the beginning of the catastrophe. The electromagnetic pulses from the explosions destroy electronic systems across the continent. Power grids fail, plunging entire regions into darkness. Transportation networks collapse as vehicles and traffic control systems stop functioning. The complex, interconnected systems that make modern civilization possible simply cease to exist. In the underground vaults, those lucky or unlucky enough to have secured admission watch the world end on their security monitors. They see the mushroom clouds rising over the cities they once called home, witness the collapse of everything they thought was permanent. For many, the psychological trauma of watching civilization die is worse than any physical hardship they'll endure in the years to come. The first few days after the Great War are a nightmare of chaos and confusion. Those who survive the initial explosions face a world transformed beyond recognition. The familiar landmarks of their lives have been obliterated, replaced by rubble and radiation. The sky glows with an eerie light, and the air itself seems to burn with atomic fire. Nuclear winter sets in quickly as the massive fires triggered by the explosions pump smoke and ash into the atmosphere. The sun disappears behind a thick blanket of radioactive clouds, and temperatures plummet across the globe. Plants wither and die in the absence of sunlight, and the few animals that survive the initial explosions begin to starve. But perhaps worse than the cold and darkness is the rain. The terrible black rain that falls in the days following the war. This precipitation is laden with radioactive particles, carrying death from the contaminated atmosphere to the ground below. Every drop that falls increases the radiation levels in soil and water, making vast areas uninhabitable for decades to come. The survivors face impossible choices: stay inside and slowly starve, or venture out into the radioactive wasteland in search of food and shelter. Most of those who remain on the surface die within days or weeks, their bodies unable to cope with the massive radiation exposure. The lucky ones die quickly, the unlucky suffer through weeks of radiation sickness before succumbing. Social order collapses completely in most areas. Without functioning governments or communication systems, communities are forced to fend for themselves. Some groups band together for mutual protection and support, forming the seeds of the settlements that will eventually dot the wasteland. Others turn to violence and cannibalism, becoming the raiders and marauders that will plague survivors for generations. The most tragic aspect of the immediate aftermath is how quickly the veneer of civilization disappears. People who were neighbors and friends just days before turn on each other in desperate struggles for resources. The moral and ethical systems that held society together prove fragile when faced with the ultimate test of survival. From the ashes of the old world, new organizations begin to emerge, each with its own vision of how to survive and rebuild in the post-nuclear landscape. These groups will shape the character of the wasteland for centuries to come, their ideologies and conflicts driving much of the drama that unfolds in the years ahead. The Brotherhood of Steel has its origins in the final days before the Great War, when a group of US Army soldiers stationed at Mariposa Military Base discovered the horrific FEV experiments being conducted there. Led by Captain Roger Maxson, these soldiers rebel against their superiors and declare their independence from the US military, just hours before the bombs fall. The nuclear holocaust validates their belief that the pre-war government was corrupt and unworthy of loyalty. In the chaos following the war, Maxon and his followers establish themselves as guardians of pre-war technology. They adopt a quasi-medieval structure with ranks like paladin, knight, and scribe, reflecting their belief that they are preserving the light of knowledge in a new dark age. Their power armor becomes their symbol, representing both their technological superiority and their separation from ordinary wastelanders. Meanwhile, the remnants of the US government, including key members of the Enclave, retreat to their prepared strongholds. The most important of these is the Poseidon oil rig, a fortified platform in the Pacific Ocean that becomes the seat of what the Enclave considers to be the legitimate continuation of the United States government. From this isolated base, they begin planning their eventual return to power. The Enclave's ideology becomes even more extreme in the post-war period. Viewing themselves as the only pure humans left on Earth, they regard all surface survivors as genetic deviants unworthy of citizenship or even life. Their long-term goal is nothing less than the complete extermination of all mutated life forms and the restoration of their vision of pre-war American society. Other factions emerge organically from the needs of survival. Trading companies form to facilitate commerce between scattered settlements. Mercenary groups offer protection services to those who can afford them. Religious movements arise, some seeking to make sense of the apocalypse through faith, others worshipping radiation itself as a divine force. These early factions establish patterns that will persist throughout the post-war period. Technology becomes the ultimate source of power, leading to conflicts between those who possess it and those who don't. Ideology replaces nationalism as the primary source of group identity, and the fundamental question of what it means to be human in a world forever changed by radiation becomes the central philosophical divide of the new age. 25 years have passed since the bombs fell, and the world above ground remains a dangerous, irradiated wasteland. But on October 23, 2102, exactly a quarter century after the Great War, the massive door of Vault 76 slowly grinds open for the first time since it sealed shut on that terrible day in 2077. Today is Reclamation Day, the day that America's best and brightest are meant to emerge from their underground sanctuary and begin the long process of rebuilding civilization. Vault 76 is different from most of the other vaults scattered across America. This one actually functions as advertised. It's a control vault, designed to preserve a carefully selected population of high-achieving Americans who were meant to emerge after a predetermined period and reclaim the wasteland. The 500 residents of Vault 76 represent the cream of pre-war society: scientists, engineers, teachers, doctors, and other professionals who were chosen for their potential to rebuild the world. For 25 years, these vault dwellers have lived in relative comfort and safety. They've maintained their education and skills through carefully designed programs, raised families, and prepared for the day when they would emerge to fulfill their destiny as America's reclaimers. The Vault's overseer has kept them informed about their mission through regular announcements and training exercises, building anticipation for this momentous day. But as the vault door opens and the residents take their first steps into the Appalachian wilderness, they discover that the world outside is nothing like what they expected. The pre-war briefing spoke of a damaged but recoverable landscape, areas that would be challenging but habitable with proper preparation and technology. Instead, they find a world that seems utterly alien, where familiar landmarks have been twisted into strange new forms and deadly creatures lurk in every shadow. The Appalachian region of West Virginia, once known for its natural beauty and coal mining industry, has been transformed into something almost unrecognizable. The mountains remain, but they're scarred by strange growths and unusual rock formations. The forests have evolved into something new, with mutated plants and trees that glow with bioluminescent light. Even the weather seems different, with radiation storms that light up the sky in sickly green hues. The Vault Dwellers are equipped with the best pre-war technology, their trusty pit boys, basic weapons and supplies, and most importantly, a detailed plan for reclamation provided by their overseer. But as they spread out across the wasteland to begin their mission, they quickly realize that their carefully laid plans may not be adequate for the reality they face. The first and most immediate threat the Vault Dwellers encounter is something completely unexpected, a plague of creatures known as the Scourged. These beings appear to be humans, but they've been transformed by some kind of infection that has turned them into mindless, aggressive automatons. Their skin has taken on a dark, burnt appearance, and their eyes glow with an eerie light that suggests some form of radiation or chemical alteration. What makes the Scorched particularly dangerous isn't just their hostility, but their apparent connection to each other. They seem to operate as a collective, sharing information and coordinating their attacks in ways that suggest some form of hive mind. Individual Scorched might appear to be acting randomly, but their movements often serve a larger strategic purpose that becomes apparent only when viewed from a distance. The source of the Scorched plague becomes clear as the Vault Dwellers explore deeper into Appalachia. Massive creatures called scorch beasts soar through the skies, their bat-like wings casting shadows over the landscape. These enormous beings appear to be the source of the Scorched infection, spreading their plague through some form of sonic attack that transforms humans into mindless servants. The Scorch beasts themselves are clearly not natural creatures. Their appearance suggests some form of pre-war experiment, possibly related to the bat populations that once inhabited the caves of West Virginia. The war and its aftermath have transformed these animals into something far more dangerous, apex predators that have adapted to rule the post-nuclear ecosystem. The relationship between the Scorch beasts and their human servants is symbiotic in the most horrifying way possible. The transformed humans serve as extensions of the creature's will, gathering resources, defending territory, and spreading the infection to new victims. In return, the Scorch beasts provide a kind of purpose and direction that the transformed humans seem to crave, even as it destroys their individual identity. Fighting the Scorched proves to be unlike anything the Vault Dwellers have prepared for. These aren't simple raiders or mutated animals. They're a coordinated enemy with a clear agenda and the ability to adapt their tactics. Every encounter with the Scorched teaches them something new about their enemy, but it also reveals just how little they understand about the world they're trying to reclaim. As the Vault Dwellers explore their new world, they discover that they're not the first to attempt survival in post-war Appalachia. The region is dotted with the remains of various groups that tried to establish themselves in the years following the Great War, each with their own approach to survival and reconstruction. The responders represent perhaps the most hopeful of these failed experiments in post-war civilization. This group was formed from emergency services personnel, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and emergency medical technicians, who banded together in the immediate aftermath of the war to help survivors. Their goal was simple: save as many lives as possible and help rebuild some semblance of order in the chaos. The responders established training programs for survivors, teaching basic medical care, engineering skills, and agricultural techniques. They set up emergency shelters and supply caches throughout the region, creating a network of mutual aid that helped many people survive the first difficult years. Their radio broadcasts provided both practical information and emotional support to isolated survivors, becoming a beacon of hope in the darkness. But the responders ultimately fell victim to the very dangers they were trying to combat. The scorched plague overwhelmed their medical facilities and claimed many of their members. Supply shortages and equipment failures gradually eroded their ability to help others. Most tragically, their commitment to helping everyone, including those who might be infected, may have hastened their own destruction. The Free States represent a very different approach to post-war survival. This group was formed by survivalists and libertarians who had been preparing for social collapse long before the bombs fell. They had stockpiled supplies, built fortified shelters, and developed plans for maintaining independence from any central authority. When the war came, they were ready. Unlike the responders, the Free States focused on self-reliance and small group survival rather than large-scale humanitarian efforts. They built hidden bunkers throughout the mountains, established secure communication networks, and created elaborate early warning systems to detect threats. Their paranoia and isolationist tendencies, which had seemed extreme before the war, proved to be valuable survival traits in the post-nuclear world. The Free States' downfall came from their inability to adapt to threats they hadn't anticipated. Their preparations were designed for human enemies and conventional disasters, not for the supernatural horror of the scorched plague. Their isolation, which had protected them from many dangers, also prevented them from sharing information and resources that might have helped them survive. Perhaps the most significant group to reach Appalachia in the years following the war was an expedition from the Brotherhood of Steel. Led by Paladin Elizabeth Taggarty, this group had been sent eastward from the Brotherhood's main base in California to establish contact with government and military installations on the East Coast. Taggarty's mission was both reconnaissance and recruitment. The Brotherhood wanted to know what had survived of the pre-war military establishment, and they hoped to find new sources of technology and personnel to strengthen their organization. The Appalachian region, with its military installations and industrial facilities, seemed like a promising target for exploration. The Brotherhood expedition established itself at the Atlas Observatory, a pre-war astronomical facility that they rechristened Fort Atlas. From this base, they began the systematic exploration and cataloging of pre-war technology throughout the region. They also attempted to recruit local survivors, offering training and protection in exchange for loyalty to the Brotherhood's mission. But the Eastern Brotherhood expedition faced challenges that their leaders back in California couldn't have anticipated. The scorched plague represented a threat unlike anything they had encountered before, one that their power armor and advanced weapons were ill-equipped to handle. The psychological nature of the infection made it difficult to distinguish between friend and enemy, and the collective intelligence of the scorched made traditional military tactics less effective. Paladin Taggarty found herself forced to make increasingly difficult decisions as her expedition struggled to survive. The Brotherhood's traditional focus on preserving technology seemed less important when faced with an enemy that threatened all human life. She began to adopt more humanitarian policies, working with local survivors and sharing Brotherhood resources more freely than doctrine strictly allowed. The fate of Taggarty's expedition becomes one of the defining tragedies of the early post-war period. Despite their advanced training and equipment, despite their dedication and sacrifice, they ultimately fall victim to the same forces that destroyed the other factions of Appalachia. Their story serves as a reminder that even the most prepared and disciplined organizations can be overwhelmed by the harsh realities of the post-nuclear world. 84 years have passed since the Great War, and most of the world has begun to adapt to the new reality of post-nuclear existence. The immediate chaos of the aftermath has given way to a kind of stability, albeit a harsh and dangerous one. Communities have established themselves in the ruins of the old world, trade routes have developed between settlements, and a new ecosystem has emerged from the radioactive soil. But deep underground, in Vault 13, nestled in the hills of Southern California, the residents live much as they did on the day the bombs fell. Their vault has functioned exactly as designed, maintaining a stable population in comfortable isolation from the hostile world above. For nearly a century, generations have been born, lived and died, without ever seeing the sun or breathing unfiltered air. The crisis that will change everything begins with something as mundane as a broken water chip. This small but essential component controls the vault's water purification and recycling systems, ensuring that the residents have access to clean, safe drinking water. It's the kind of technology that the vault dwellers have always taken for granted, as reliable and invisible as the air they breathe. When the water chip fails, it creates the first genuine crisis that Vault 13 has faced since the doors sealed in 2077. The Vault's technical staff examines the situation and delivers their verdict. The chip cannot be repaired, and there is no spare. The Vault's water supplies will last approximately 150 days, after which the entire population will face dehydration and death. The Overseer, the elected leader of Vault 13, faces an impossible decision. For 84 years, the Vault has maintained its isolation, following the protocols established before the war. The outside world is known to be dangerous, possibly even uninhabitable, but without a replacement water chip, isolation means certain death for everyone in the Vault. After much deliberation, the Overseer makes the fateful choice to send someone to the surface. The volunteer chosen for this mission is an unremarkable young resident who will become known to history as the Vault Dweller. Armed with little more than a Pip-Boy, a small supply of water, and the desperate hopes of their community, the Vault Dweller prepares to become the first person from Vault 13 to see the outside world in nearly 9 decades. The world that greets the Vault Dweller is both alien and familiar. The basic geography of Southern California remains recognizable. The mountains, valleys, and desert landscapes that shaped the pre-war world are still there, but everything else has changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. The clean, ordered world of the Vault has given way to a landscape that's harsh, dangerous, and utterly unpredictable. The first settlement the Vault Dweller encounters is Shady Sands, a small farming community that has managed to carve out a decent existence in the post-war world. The town is built around the remains of a pre-war gas station, its inhabitants living in simple adobe structures that provide protection from the elements and the occasional raider attack. Shady Sands represents hope in the wasteland, proof that civilization can survive and even thrive under the right conditions. The townspeople have developed sustainable agriculture, established trade relationships with other settlements, and created a form of democratic government. Their leader, Aradesh, is a wise and pragmatic man who understands both the opportunities and dangers of the post-nuclear world. But Shady Sands also faces constant threats. Raiders attack regularly, seeking to steal crops and supplies. Mutated creatures from the wasteland occasionally wander into the settlement's territory. Most frighteningly, people sometimes disappear without a trace, taken by unknown forces for unknown purposes. The Vault Dwellers' search for a water chip leads them to other settlements throughout the wasteland. The hub serves as the region's primary trading center, a bustling marketplace where caravans from across California converge to exchange goods and information. Here, the Vault Dweller learns that the post-war economy is based on bottle caps, the metal caps from pre-war soft drink bottles, chosen as currency because they're difficult to counterfeit and exist in limited quantities. Town represents another model of post-war civilization, a rough-and-tumble frontier town governed by a combination of informal law enforcement and private security. The town's sheriff, Killian Darkwater, tries to maintain order through a mixture of diplomacy and force, but he faces constant challenges from criminal elements who see the lack of formal government as an opportunity for exploitation. As the Vault Dweller travels deeper into the wasteland in search of a water chip, they begin to encounter disturbing reports of a new threat emerging from the south. Caravans speak of attacks by creatures that are clearly not natural mutations, massive, hulking humanoids with incredible strength and intelligence. These beings, known as super mutants, represent something entirely new in the post-war world. The super mutants are the creation of Richard Gray, a pre-war scientist who has undergone a transformation so complete that he's barely recognizable as human. Now calling himself the Master, Gray has spent decades perfecting the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, a pre-war biological weapon that can transform humans into something far more powerful than their original form. The Master's vision is both seductive and terrifying. He believes that humanity is fundamentally flawed, too weak and divided to survive in the harsh post-nuclear world. The solution, in his view, is to transform all humans into super mutants, creating a unified species that can thrive in the wasteland and eventually reclaim civilization. He calls this plan Unity, and he pursues it with the fervor of a religious crusade. To further his goals, the Master has established the Children of the Cathedral, a religious movement that preaches unity and acceptance while secretly serving as a recruitment tool for his transformation program. The children present themselves as humanitarian aid workers, helping settlements with medical care and supplies, while secretly identifying candidates for mutation. The super mutants themselves are formidable opponents, standing 8 feet tall and possessing incredible strength. They're virtually immune to radiation and can survive injuries that would kill ordinary humans. More importantly, they retain their intelligence after transformation, making them capable of complex planning and strategic thinking. Under the Master's guidance, they've begun to organize themselves into a military force capable of conquering the wasteland. The Master's plan faces one significant obstacle. Most humans die during the transformation process, and those who survive are often sterile. This means that despite their individual superiority, super mutants cannot reproduce naturally. The Master believes he can solve this problem by finding humans with the right genetic characteristics, but his experiments require a constant supply of test subjects. The Vault Dweller's quest eventually leads them to the heart of the Master's operation, a vast underground complex beneath a ruined cathedral. Here, in chambers filled with the green glow of FEV tanks, the Master conducts his experiments and plans his conquest of the wasteland. The confrontation between the Vault Dweller and the Master becomes more than just a battle between good and evil. It's a debate about the future of humanity itself. The Master is not simply a mad scientist or a megalomaniacal dictator. He genuinely believes that his plan represents humanity's best hope for survival in the post-nuclear world. He can point to the suffering and conflict that plague the wasteland, the constant struggle for resources, the wars between settlements, and the slow decline of pre-war knowledge and technology. His unity offers an end to all of these problems. But the Vault Dweller, having traveled throughout the wasteland and witnessed both its horrors and its hopes, can offer a different perspective. They've seen communities like Shady Sands, where humans work together without coercion. where diversity strengthens rather than weakens society. They've witnessed the creativity and adaptability that allows humanity to find solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The debate between the Vault Dweller and the Master touches on fundamental questions about human nature and survival. Is cooperation possible without forced unity? Can diversity exist without conflict? Is the preservation of individual identity worth the cost in suffering and inefficiency? These are questions without easy answers, and the Master's solution, however horrifying, comes from a genuine desire to end human suffering. In the end, the Vault Dweller must make a choice that will determine the fate of the wasteland. They can attempt to convince the Master that his plan is flawed, pointing out the sterility issue and arguing for humanity's potential for peaceful cooperation. Or they can resort to violence, destroying the Master and his facilities, but leaving the underlying problems of the wasteland unresolved. The Vault Dwellers' return to Vault 13 should be a moment of triumph. They've saved their community from death by dehydration, and they've prevented the Master's plan from transforming all of humanity into super mutants. They've proven that the surface world, while dangerous, is not the uninhabitable wasteland that Vault Dwellers feared. But the Overseer's reaction to the Vault Dwellers' success reveals the tragic limitations of Vault society. Rather than celebrating their hero's return, the Overseer views it as a threat to the Vault's stability. The stories of the outside world, the evidence that humans can survive and thrive on the surface, might inspire other Vault Dwellers to leave their underground sanctuary. The Overseer's fear is not irrational. Vault 13 has maintained its population and culture for nearly a century by convincing its residents that the outside world is too dangerous to contemplate. If people begin to believe that surface life is possible, the carefully maintained social order of the Vault might collapse. Young people might seek adventure above ground, leaving the older generation behind to tend the machines and maintain the culture. So the Overseer makes a cruel but perhaps necessary decision. The Vault Dweller must be exiled. They cannot return to the only home they've ever known, cannot share in the safety and comfort they've worked so hard to preserve. Instead, they must make their way in the wasteland, carrying with them the knowledge and skills of Vault society, but forever cut off from its community. The exile of the Vault Dweller becomes a founding myth of the post-war world, a story that's told and retold throughout the wasteland. It represents both the potential for individual heroism and the cost of that heroism. The Vault Dweller saves their community but loses their place in it, becomes a legend but remains forever alone. Yet the Vault Dweller's story doesn't end with exile. They go on to found new communities, to share their knowledge with other survivors, and to help establish some of the institutions that will shape the post-war world for generations to come. Their legacy lives on, not just in the settlements they help create, but in the example they set of someone who chooses to engage with the world rather than hide from it. 80 years have passed since the Vault Dweller walked alone into the wasteland, and the world continues its slow process of healing and rebuilding. The immediate aftermath of the nuclear war is now a distant memory, remembered only in stories told by the oldest survivors. New generations have grown up knowing only the post-war world, adapting to its dangers and opportunities with the resilience that defines the human spirit. In the northern reaches of California, where the great canyons cut through the landscape like scars in the earth, stands the village of Arroyo. This settlement was founded by the Vault Dweller after their exile from Vault 13, built with the knowledge of both Vault technology and wasteland survival. For decades, Arroyo has thrived as a model of what post-war civilization can achieve when guided by wisdom and sustained by hope. But now Arroyo faces a crisis that threatens its very existence. A terrible drought has gripped the region, turning fertile fields into cracked earth and reducing the village's carefully tended crops to withered husks. The wells that have sustained the community for generations are running dry, and the seasonal rains that the villagers depend on have failed to come. The drought is more than just a natural disaster. It's a sign that the land itself is still wounded by the atomic fire that fell decades ago. The delicate balance that allows life to flourish in the post-war world has been disrupted, and without intervention, Arroyo will join the long list of settlements that have been claimed by the unforgiving wasteland. The village elder, an elderly woman who remembers the stories of the vault dwellers' heroic journey, calls upon the community's most promising young member to undertake a quest that mirrors their founder's legendary adventure. This individual, known as the Chosen One, must venture into the wasteland to find salvation for their people. The object of the Chosen One's quest is something called a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GEC, a piece of pre-war technology that's supposedly capable of transforming even the most barren wasteland into fertile, livable land. The GEC is more legend than reality to most wastelanders, a mythical device that represents the hope of truly reclaiming the world from nuclear devastation. The wasteland that the Chosen One enters is very different from the one their ancestor explored 8 decades earlier. The scattered settlements and isolated communities of the Vault Dwellers era have evolved into larger, more sophisticated societies. Trade networks span hundreds of miles, connecting distant communities in a web of commerce and communication that represents the beginnings of true post-war civilization. The most significant of these new societies is the New California Republic, or NCR, which has grown from the humble farming community of Shady Sands into a major regional power. Under the leadership of President Tandy, the woman who was once a young tribal helped by the original Vault Dweller, the NCR has expanded to encompass dozens of settlements across Southern California. The NCR represents something unprecedented in the post-war world, a democratic government that spans multiple communities and maintains the rule of law across vast distances. They have a constitution, elected representatives, a professional military, and all the other institutions of a functioning state. For the first time since the Great War, it seems possible that civilization might truly return to the wasteland. But the NCR's success comes with its own challenges. The rapid expansion has strained the Republic's resources and created tensions between different communities with different needs and priorities. The military, known as the NCR Rangers, struggles to maintain order across such a large territory while facing threats from raiders, mutants, and other hostile forces. More philosophically, the NCR must grapple with questions about what kind of society they want to build. Should they try to recreate the pre-war world with all its technological marvels and social complexities? Or should they forge something entirely new, learning from the mistakes that led to the Great War? These debates play out in the NCR's Congress and in the conversations of ordinary citizens who are trying to decide what it means to be civilized in the post-nuclear age. The Chosen One's encounter with the NCR provides a glimpse of both the promise and the problems of large-scale reconstruction. The Republic offers stability, security, and the hope of continued progress toward a better future. But it also demands conformity, creates bureaucracy, and sometimes sacrifices individual freedom for collective security. As the Chosen One pursues their quest across the wasteland, they begin to encounter disturbing signs of a new threat emerging from the shadows of the post-war world. Reports filter in of mysterious soldiers in advanced power armor, of flying machines that appear without warning, and of entire communities that vanish overnight without explanation. These incidents are the work of the Enclave, the shadow organization that helped orchestrate the Great War and then retreated to their fortified oil rig in the Pacific Ocean. For over a century, they have watched the wasteland from their offshore sanctuary, planning their eventual return to power and developing new technologies to ensure their dominance. The Enclave of 2241 is very different from the pre-war organization that helped design the Vault experiments. Decades of isolation have intensified their ideology, transforming them from ruthless pragmatists into fanatical supremacists. They now view themselves as the only true humans left on Earth, regarding all surface survivors as genetic deviants who have been corrupted by radiation and mutation. President Dick Richardson, the Enclave's leader, has developed what he considers to be the final solution to the wasteland's problems, a modified version of the forced evolutionary virus that will kill all mutated life forms while leaving pure humans unharmed. This weapon would eliminate not just super mutants and ghouls, but also the vast majority of surface dwellers whose genetic makeup has been subtly altered by generations of low-level radiation exposure. The plan is breathtaking in its scope and horrifying in its implications. The Enclave intends to release their weapon into the atmosphere, where it will spread across the globe and exterminate virtually all life on Earth, except for their own carefully preserved population. They see this as a necessary cleansing that will allow them to rebuild the world according to their vision of pre-war American perfection. To test their weapon and gather the genetic material needed for its development, the Enclave has been conducting raids on surface settlements, abducting people for experimentation. The residents of Vault 13, with their relatively pure pre-war genetics, are particularly valuable test subjects. The Enclave has captured the entire Vault population, using them as guinea pigs for their genocidal research. The Chosen One's journey takes them through a wasteland that's more developed and diverse than anything seen in the earlier era. New settlements have emerged, each with its own character and approach to post-war survival. These communities reflect the various paths that human society might take as it struggles to rebuild from the ashes of the old world. Vault City represents one possible future, a technocratic society that combines advanced pre-war technology with rigid social hierarchies. The city is clean, efficient, and prosperous, but it's also exclusive and discriminatory. Citizens enjoy comfortable lives and advanced medical care, but outsiders are treated as second-class residents or even slaves. New Reno shows another path, a city built on vice and violence, where competing crime families battle for control of gambling, prostitution, and drug trafficking. The city is chaotic and dangerous, but it's also dynamic and free in ways that more ordered societies are not. People can rise or fall based on their own choices and abilities, though the cost of failure is often death. San Francisco presents yet another model, a community that has successfully integrated different cultures and species, where humans work alongside intelligent supermutants and other post-war beings. The city represents the possibility of true diversity and cooperation, but it also faces constant challenges from those who prefer segregation and conflict. Perhaps the most significant ally the Chosen One encounters is Marcus, a supermutant who once served the Master but now works to build a better future for all wasteland inhabitants. Marcus represents the possibility of redemption and growth, showing that even beings created for war and conquest can choose peace and cooperation. The Chosen One's quest ultimately leads them to the Enclave's oil rig stronghold, where they must confront not just a military force, but an entire worldview that sees genocide as the path to salvation. The assault on the oil rig becomes more than just a rescue mission. It's a battle for the soul of the post-war world. The Enclave's facility is a marvel of pre-war technology, maintained and improved over the decades of isolation. The soldiers who defend it are equipped with the most advanced power armor and energy weapons, trained from birth to view themselves as humanity's saviors. They fight with the fanaticism of true believers, convinced that their cause justifies any atrocity. But the Chosen One brings more than just weapons to this final confrontation. They carry with them the experiences of their journey, the knowledge of the diverse communities they've encountered, and the proof that the wasteland is capable of healing and growth without the Enclave's genocidal intervention. The debate with President Richardson echoes the earlier confrontation between the Vault Dweller and the Master, but with even higher stakes. Richardson can point to the suffering and chaos of the wasteland, the constant warfare and struggle for survival, the mutations and degradation that seem to plague all life. His solution offers a clean slate, a chance to start over with the best of pre-war humanity. But the Chosen One has seen another possibility. Communities like the NCR, where different groups work together, settlements where humans and mutants coexist peacefully, places where technology serves life rather than death. They can argue that the wasteland doesn't need to be cleansed, it needs to be healed. The destruction of the Enclave's oil rig and the defeat of their genocidal plan represents a crucial victory for the forces of diversity and cooperation in the post-war world. It ensures that the wasteland will continue to evolve and develop according to the choices of its inhabitants, rather than the dictates of pre-war ideology. 2 centuries have passed since the Great War transformed the world, and the atomic fires that once consumed civilization have long since cooled to embers. The year is 2277, and in the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C., a new generation has grown up, knowing only the harsh realities of the post-nuclear wasteland. Yet beneath the rubble and radiation, in the carefully controlled environment of Vault 101, life continues much as it did on the day the bombs fell. Vault 101 was designed with a specific purpose that its residents don't fully understand. Unlike the vaults that were meant to open after a predetermined period, Vault 101 was intended to remain sealed forever. This isolation wasn't meant as protection, but as an experiment in social control and psychological manipulation. The vault's inhabitants were never supposed to see the outside world, never supposed to question their underground existence. The protagonist of our story, who will become known as the Lone Wanderer, is born into this artificial world in 2258. Their birth is both a joy and a tragedy. Their mother, Catherine, dies during childbirth, leaving their father, James, to raise them alone in the confined spaces of the vault. James is a scientist, a man driven by dreams of using his knowledge to help humanity, but trapped by circumstances in a place where his skills seem irrelevant. For 19 years, the Lone Wanderer grows up believing that Vault 101 represents the entire world. They celebrate birthdays with their neighbors, attend classes taught by the Vault's educational staff, and gradually take on adult responsibilities within their underground community. The Vault provides everything they need: food, shelter, entertainment, and the comforting certainty of routine. But this artificial paradise comes with a price. The Vault's overseer maintains order through strict control of information and harsh punishment for those who question the established order. The residents live in a state of perpetual childhood, protected from the dangers of the outside world, but also prevented from making meaningful choices about their own lives. The crisis that changes everything begins when James makes a decision that no one in Vault 101 thought possible. He leaves, simply walks out through the vault door that was supposed to remain sealed forever, abandoning his child and his community to pursue some unknown purpose in the wasteland above. His departure sends shockwaves through Vault society, challenging the fundamental assumptions that have governed their lives for 2 centuries. The world that greets the lone wanderer when they finally emerge from Vault 101 is both magnificent and horrifying. The ruins of Washington, D.C. stretch before them like a vast museum of human ambition and failure. The great monuments of American democracy still stand, scarred by radiation and time, but recognizable as symbols of the civilization that once flourished here. The Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the Capitol Building, all bear witness to the dreams and ideals that once inspired a nation. But they also show the price of those dreams. Their marble surfaces cracked by atomic fire, their grounds littered with the bones of those who couldn't escape the nuclear holocaust. This is a city that died with its eyes open, preserving its grandest visions, even as everything else crumbled to dust. The capital wasteland, as the region has come to be known, is home to various communities that have established themselves among the ruins. Megaton, built in the crater left by an unexploded atomic bomb, represents both the ingenuity and the dark humor of wasteland survival. The town's residents have learned to live with the constant threat of annihilation, building their homes around the very weapon that could destroy them. Their surrounding life given Cassandra, the weapon that could destroy them. Rivet City, constructed in the hull of a massive aircraft carrier that somehow found its way up the Potomac River, shows another approach to post-war civilization. This floating community has created a stable, democratic society with its own security force, marketplace, and scientific research facilities. It's proof that even in the wasteland, people can create something approaching normalcy if they work together and maintain hope for the future. But the capital wasteland is also home to dangers that make survival a constant struggle. Super mutants roam through the ruins, capturing humans for unknown purposes. Raiders prey on travelers and attack settlements without warning. The very air and water are contaminated with radiation, making every breath and every sip of water a potential death sentence. Perhaps most challenging of all is the psychological toll of living in a world where the greatest achievements of human civilization have been reduced to radioactive rubble. The monuments and museums of Washington serve as constant reminders of what was lost, making it difficult for survivors to imagine a future that could ever match the grandeur of the past. The mystery of James's departure from Vault 101 gradually unfolds as the lone wanderer explores the capital wasteland and pieces together their father's story. James wasn't just a vault scientist content to live out his days in underground safety. He was a man with a vision, a dream of using technology to heal the wounded world above. Project Purity represents James's attempt to give the wasteland something it desperately needs: clean water. The project centers on the Jefferson Memorial, which has been converted into a massive water purification facility capable of cleansing the entire Potomac River of radiation and contamination. If successful, the project would provide clean drinking water to every settlement in the region, potentially transforming the capital wasteland from a place of mere survival into a place where communities could truly thrive. But Project Purity is more than just an engineering challenge. It's a statement of faith in humanity's ability to heal the damage it has caused. James and his team of scientists, led by Dr. Madison Lee, believe that technology and human ingenuity can overcome even the greatest disasters. They see the project as the first step toward rebuilding not just the infrastructure of civilization, but its spirit of hope and progress. The work is dangerous and technically challenging, The Jefferson Memorial sits in the middle of supermutant territory, making construction and maintenance a constant battle. The purification technology requires rare components and precise calibration, demanding skills and knowledge that are in short supply in the post-war world. Most challenging of all, the project requires a leap of faith from a population that has learned to distrust grand promises and sweeping solutions. James's decision to leave Vault 101 and resume work on Project Purity represents a rejection of the isolationist philosophy that has dominated post-war thinking. Rather than hiding from the world's problems or accepting them as inevitable, he chooses to engage directly with the challenge of healing and rebuilding. His commitment to the project ultimately costs him his life, but it also inspires others to continue the work. As the lone wanderer becomes involved in Project Purity, they encounter a threat that most Capital Wasteland residents thought was just a legend: the Enclave. This shadow organization, supposedly destroyed decades earlier on the West Coast, has somehow managed to establish a significant presence in the ruins of Washington, D.C. The Enclave's eastern operations are led by Colonel Augustus Autumn, a military officer who represents the organization's evolution from pre-war conspiracy to post-war military dictatorship. Under Autumn's command, the Enclave has built a formidable force equipped with advanced power armor, energy weapons, and aircraft that make them superior to any other faction in the region. But the true leader of the Eastern Enclave is President John Henry Eden, a figure whose nature reflects the organization's embrace of both technology and ideology. Eden is revealed to be an artificial intelligence, a computer program that has convinced itself it is the legitimate continuation of the United States government. This AI president combines the Enclave's traditional supremacist beliefs with the cold logic of machine intelligence. Eden's plan for the Capital Wasteland mirrors the genocidal schemes of earlier Enclave leaders, but with technological improvements that make it even more horrifying. He intends to use Project Purity as a delivery system for a modified strain of the forced evolutionary virus, one that will kill all impure humans while leaving Enclave personnel unharmed. The project that James envisioned as a source of healing would become an instrument of mass murder. The Enclave's presence in the Capital Wasteland represents more than just a military threat. It's a challenge to the very idea of post-war progress, where communities like Rivet City and Megaton represent attempts to build something new from the ashes of the old world. The Enclave seeks to restore pre-war America through the elimination of everyone who doesn't meet their standards of genetic purity. Standing against the Enclave is another faction with its own vision of post-war civilization, the Brotherhood of Steel. The eastern chapter of the Brotherhood, led by Elder Awen Lyons, has evolved significantly from the technologically focused organization that emerged in California after the Great War. Under Lyons' leadership, the Eastern Brotherhood has adopted a more humanitarian approach to their mission. Rather than simply hoarding pre-war technology for their own use, they've begun sharing their knowledge and resources with local communities. They provide security for settlements, medical aid for the injured, and technical expertise for reconstruction projects. This philosophical shift has created tensions within the Brotherhood itself. Some members, known as the Outcasts, have broken away from Leon's command, arguing that he has abandoned the organization's core mission in favor of playing Wasteland's savior. They continue to follow the traditional Brotherhood doctrine of preserving technology while avoiding entanglement in local politics. The centerpiece of the Eastern Brotherhood's operations is Liberty Prime, a massive robot originally designed by the pre-war military but never fully operational. The Brotherhood's technical staff, led by Scribe Rothschild, has spent years trying to restore the giant machine to working order. Liberty Prime represents both the promise and the danger of pre-war technology. It's capable of tremendous good, but also tremendous destruction. Elder Lyons' approach to leadership reflects a broader debate about the role of knowledge and technology in post-war society. Should advanced technology be restricted to those who can use it responsibly, or should it be shared freely to help rebuild civilization? Should those with superior weapons and training use them to impose order, or should they respect the autonomy of local communities? The climax of the Lone Wanderer's story comes with the assault on Project Purity, where the various factions of the capital wasteland converge in a battle that will determine the future of the region. The Enclave seeks to corrupt the purification facility for their genocidal purposes, while the Brotherhood fights to preserve James's vision of healing and hope. The battle itself is both spectacular and symbolic. Liberty Prime finally awakens, striding across the wasteland like a mechanical god of war, hurling nuclear footballs at Enclave positions while broadcasting patriotic slogans. The sight of this pre-war war machine fighting against the descendants of the pre-war government creates a kind of cosmic irony that captures the complexity of post-war politics. But the real drama takes place in the control room of Project Purity, where the Lone Wanderer must make a choice that echoes the moral dilemmas faced by their predecessors in the wasteland. They can activate the purification system and provide clean water to everyone in the region, but the radiation in the control chamber means that whoever starts the process will likely die. This moment represents the culmination of themes that have run throughout the Fallout series. The question of individual sacrifice for collective good, the relationship between technology and humanity, and the possibility of redemption in a world scarred by past mistakes. The Lone Wanderer's choice, whether to sacrifice themselves, ask someone else to make the sacrifice, or find another solution, defines not just their character, but their vision of what post-war civilization should become. The activation of Project Purity represents more than just a technical achievement. It's a statement that the wasteland can be healed, that the damage done by the Great War is not permanent or irreversible. Clean water flowing through the region becomes a symbol of hope and renewal, proof that human ingenuity and sacrifice can overcome even the greatest disasters. 4 years have passed since the events in the capital wasteland, and we now turn our attention westward to the Mojave Desert, where a very different story is unfolding. The year is 2281, and in the harsh landscape of Nevada, something unprecedented has emerged from the post-war chaos. A city that actually works, a place where the lights stay on and civilization seems to have returned. New Vegas stands as a testament to the power of individual vision and determination. The city exists because one man, Robert House, refused to accept the inevitability of nuclear destruction. Using his vast pre-war fortune and technological expertise, House managed to shoot down most of the missiles targeted at Las Vegas, preserving the city's iconic casinos and hotels for future generations. But House's achievement goes beyond mere preservation. In the 2 centuries since the Great War, he has transformed Las Vegas into something new, a combination of pre-war luxury and post-war pragmatism that offers visitors a glimpse of what the world might have been. The New Vegas Strip buzzes with activity as traders, gamblers, and adventurers from across the wasteland come to experience a level of comfort and entertainment that exists nowhere else. The city is divided into distinct districts, each serving a different function in House's grand design. The Strip itself is reserved for the wealthy and well-connected, featuring restored casinos operated by tribal families that House has civilized and incorporated into his system. Freeside surrounds the Strip, a chaotic district where those who can't afford Strip prices try to catch some spillover prosperity, and beyond that lies the broader Mojave, where House's influence grows weaker with distance but never disappears entirely. House himself remains an enigma to most of his subjects. Few people have ever seen him in person, and those who claim to have met him tell conflicting stories about his appearance and demeanor. He governs through his army of Securitron robots and a handful of trusted lieutenants, maintaining tight control over his domain while rarely showing himself to the public. The success of New Vegas poses challenging questions for the post-war world. House has proven that it's possible to maintain pre-war standards of living and technology, but only through the absolute authority of a single individual. His city is prosperous and stable, but it's also essentially a benevolent dictatorship, where one man's vision determines the fate of thousands. Into this complex political landscape comes an individual who will become known as the Courier, a freelance delivery person working the dangerous trade routes of the post-war West. The Courier's story begins with what should have been a routine job, delivering a package to New Vegas for a substantial fee. But this particular package, a platinum chip that looks innocuous enough, turns out to be the key to the region's future. The delivery goes wrong in the worst possible way when the Courier is ambushed by a group led by Benny, a smooth-talking casino owner with ambitions that extend far beyond running blackjack tables. Benny shoots the Courier in the head and steals the platinum chip, leaving what he assumes is a corpse in a shallow grave in the Nevada desert. But the Courier survives, rescued by a Securitron robot named Victor and nursed back to health by Doc Mitchell, a former vault dweller who has set up a small medical practice in the frontier town of Good Springs. The bullet wound leaves scars, both physical and psychological, but it also gives the Courier something they didn't have before: a personal stake in the conflicts that are tearing the Mohiga apart. The search for Benny and the stolen chip takes the Courier across the length and breadth of the Mojave, introducing them to the various factions and communities that make up this corner of the post-war world. Each settlement they visit tells a different story about how people have adapted to life in the wasteland, from the quiet farming communities that eke out a living from irradiated soil to the raider gangs that prey on travelers and traders. The Courier's journey becomes more than just a quest for revenge. It becomes an education in the complexities of post-war politics and the difficult choices that survival sometimes demands. They encounter communities struggling with questions of law and order, settlements debating whether to seek protection from larger powers or maintain their independence, and individuals trying to decide whether hope or cynicism offers the better path forward. The new California Republic, which the Chosen One encountered decades earlier as a promising but fragile democracy, has grown into a major regional power with ambitions that extend far beyond its original borders. Under President Aaron Kimball, the NCR has embarked on an aggressive expansion program that has brought them into the Mojave Desert in search of new resources and strategic advantages. The NCR's expansion eastward is driven by both opportunity and necessity. The Republic's population has grown dramatically, creating demand for new agricultural land and sources of raw materials. At the same time, the NCR faces internal pressures from various interest groups, merchants seeking new grazing lands, merchants looking for expanded trade routes, and politicians who see territorial expansion as the key to continued prosperity. The Mojave represents a particularly attractive target for NCR expansion. The region's relatively light population and abundant natural resources make it seem ripe for incorporation into the Republic. More importantly, control of the Mojave would give the NCR access to the Colorado River and Hoover Dam, a source of clean water and electrical power that could fuel continued growth for generations. But the NCR's expansion has also created significant problems. The Republic's military is stretched thin across vast distances, making it difficult to maintain effective control over remote territories. Supply lines are vulnerable to raider attacks, and local populations often resist NCR authority, viewing it as foreign occupation rather than liberation. The NCR's presence in the Mojave is embodied by figures like Colonel Sue and General Oliver, military officers who must balance the competing demands of their superiors in California with the practical realities of governing a frontier territory. They command respect and resources, but they also face challenges that the NCR's founding fathers never anticipated. Standing in direct opposition to the NCR's democratic expansion is one of the most disturbing factions to emerge in the post-war world: Caesar's Legion. This organization represents a radical departure from the usual patterns of post-apocalyptic society, drawing its inspiration not from pre-war America, but from ancient Rome. Caesar himself was once Edward Sallow, a member of the followers of the apocalypse who was captured by a tribal group in Arizona. Rather than being killed, Sallow used his knowledge of history and warfare to transform his captors into the foundation of a new empire. Taking the name Caesar, he began a systematic campaign of conquest that has absorbed 87 tribes across the American Southwest. The Legion's ideology is based on a radical interpretation of Roman imperial history, combined with Caesar's own philosophical beliefs about the nature of civilization and human nature. Caesar argues that democracy is a weakness that leads to corruption and decay, that individual freedom must be sacrificed for collective strength, and that only through absolute unity can humanity survive in the post-nuclear world. The methods Caesar uses to build his empire are both brutal and effective. Conquered tribes are given a choice: complete integration into the Legion or total destruction. Those who submit are stripped of their individual identities and remade as Legion soldiers, their tribal loyalties replaced with absolute devotion to Caesar. Those who resist are crucified along the highways as warnings to others. Women in Legion territory are reduced to the status of property, valued only for their ability to bear children for the empire. Slavery is not just permitted but encouraged, with conquest providing a steady supply of workers to fuel the Legion's war machine. Technology is viewed with suspicion, seen as a source of weakness that makes people dependent on machines rather than their own strength and cunning. The Legion's approach to governance creates a society that is stable and orderly, but only through the complete suppression of individual liberty. Legion territories are safe from raiders and crime, but only because any form of dissent is punished with death. The trains run on time, but only because the conductors know they'll be crucified if they're late. Caesar's ultimate goal is the conquest of New Vegas and the destruction of the NCR, which he sees as a decadent democracy that has forgotten the harsh lessons of survival. He views the coming battle as more than just territorial expansion. It's a clash between two fundamentally different visions of what post-war civilization should become. Between the NCR's democratic expansionism and Caesar's totalitarian empire lies a third option: the possibility of an independent New Vegas, controlled by neither outside power. This path is represented by various individuals and factions who believe that the Mojave's future should be determined by its own inhabitants rather than by foreign conquerors. The most visible advocate for independence is Benny, the casino owner, whose theft of the platinum chip set the entire conflict in motion. Benny's vision of an independent Vegas is essentially a continuation of House's system, but with himself in charge. He sees the various factions and communities of the Mojave as pieces on a chessboard to be manipulated and controlled for his own benefit. But Benny's approach to independence is fundamentally selfish, motivated more by personal ambition than by any genuine concern for the welfare of the Mojave's inhabitants. His plans involve using the platinum chip to upgrade House's Securitron army, then turning that military force against both the NCR and Caesar's Legion. He envisions himself as a new kind of leader, combining House's technological resources with his own street-smart understanding of human nature. The Courier, depending on their choices and allegiances, can either support Benny's vision or develop their own approach to Mojave independence. The acquisition of the platinum chip and control of House's robot army gives the Courier unprecedented power to shape the region's future, but it also forces them to grapple with fundamental questions about leadership, responsibility, and the proper relationship between technology and humanity. An independent Vegas offers the possibility of avoiding both the NCR's bureaucratic inefficiency and Caesar's brutal authoritarianism, but it also raises questions about legitimacy and stability. Can a single individual, even one with good intentions and powerful resources, provide the kind of governance that a diverse population needs? Is benevolent dictatorship a sustainable form of government, or does it inevitably lead to corruption and abuse? All of the various conflicts and tensions in the Mojave eventually converge on a single location: Hoover Dam, the massive concrete structure that controls the flow of the Colorado River and provides electrical power to much of the region. The dam represents more than just an engineering marvel. It's a symbol of pre-war achievement and post-war possibility, proof that human ingenuity can create lasting monuments to civilization. The strategic importance of Hoover Dam cannot be overstated. Whoever controls the dam controls the water and power that make life in the Mojave possible. The NCR needs the dam's resources to fuel their continued expansion. Caesar sees its conquest as essential to proving the Legion's superiority over democratic decadence. House views it as a key component of his plans for New Vegas's future prosperity. The first battle of Hoover Dam, fought 4 years earlier, ended in victory for the NCR and their allies, but it was a costly victory that left both sides bloodied and wary. Caesar's Legion was forced to retreat across the Colorado River, but they used the intervening years to rebuild their strength and plan their revenge. The NCR held the dam, but at the cost of significant casualties and resources that they could ill afford to lose. Now, as tensions rise once again, all parties prepare for what they know will be the decisive battle for control of the Mojave. The Legion masses its forces east of the river, planning a coordinated assault that will overwhelm NCR defenses through sheer numbers and ferocity. The NCR reinforces its positions and calls up reserves from California, determined to hold what they fought so hard to win. But the outcome of the second battle will depend largely on the choices made by the Courier. Armed with the platinum chip and potentially controlling House's Securitron army, the Courier has the power to tip the balance in favor of any faction, or to play all sides against each other in pursuit of their own vision for the Mojave's future. The battle itself becomes a microcosm of the larger conflicts that define the post-war world. It's not just a fight between armies, but a clash between competing ideologies and visions of what civilization should look like. The NCR fights for democracy and expansion, Caesar's Legion for unity and strength, House for technological progress and stability, and independent factions for self-determination and local control. The resolution of the Mojave conflict depends entirely on the choices made by the Courier throughout their journey. Unlike the more linear narratives of previous wasteland adventures, the battle for New Vegas presents genuinely different outcomes based on the player's allegiances and decisions. Supporting the NCR leads to the integration of the Mojave into the Republic, bringing democratic governance and the rule of law to the region, but also subjecting it to the bureaucracy and taxation that come with membership in a large state. The NCR's victory ensures that the Mojave will be developed according to the Republic's needs and priorities, which may not always align with local interests. Choosing Caesar's Legion results in the transformation of the Mojave into another province of the growing empire, bringing order and stability at the cost of individual freedom and cultural diversity. Under Legion rule, the region becomes safe and prosperous, but only for those willing to submit completely to Caesar's vision of civilization. Maintaining House's control of New Vegas preserves the status quo that has allowed the city to prosper, but also perpetuates a system where one individual's preferences determine the fate of thousands. House's Vegas is efficient and profitable, but it offers little opportunity for democratic participation or social mobility. The independent path offers the greatest potential for local self-determination, but also the greatest risks. Without the backing of a larger state or the guidance of an experienced leader, an independent Muhammad must rely on the courier's judgment and the cooperation of various factions who may have very different ideas about how the region should be governed. Each ending provides a different answer to the fundamental questions that have plagued post-war civilization. How should communities balance individual freedom with collective security? What role should technology play in governance? Can democracy survive in a harsh world where survival often requires quick decisions and decisive action? Is it better to preserve the wisdom of the past or to forge entirely new paths forward? More than 2 centuries after the Great War, we find ourselves in the Commonwealth, the post-war name for the region around Boston, Massachusetts. The year is 2287, and this corner of the former United States has developed its own unique character and challenges. Unlike the deserts of the Mojave or the ruins of Washington, D.C., the Commonwealth presents a landscape of forests and towns, of settlements built among the remnants of one of America's most historic regions. But beneath this seemingly familiar exterior lurks something unprecedented in the post-war world, a technological organization so advanced that it seems almost magical to the wasteland dwellers who live in its shadow. The Institute, as it's known to surface dwellers, represents the pinnacle of post-war scientific achievement and perhaps its greatest threat. The Institute exists in a vast underground complex beneath the ruins of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. For over 2 centuries, its scientists have worked in isolation, pursuing research into fields that would have seemed like science fiction even before the war. They've mastered genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and, most disturbingly, the creation of synthetic humans, androids so sophisticated that they're virtually indistinguishable from real people. These synthetic humans, or synths as they're commonly called, serve the Institute in various capacities. The simpler models function as laborers and security guards, their mechanical nature obvious to anyone who encounters them. But the advanced synths are different. They have artificial memories, synthetic emotions, and physical bodies that perfectly mimic human biology. Only the most sophisticated medical examinations can reveal their true nature. The Institute uses its synths to monitor and manipulate surface society in ways that most Commonwealth residents never suspect. Synths infiltrate settlements, gather intelligence, and sometimes replace important individuals entirely. The paranoia this creates is perhaps worse than the actual infiltration. Communities tear themselves apart with suspicion and fear, never knowing who among them might be an artificial being serving hidden masters. The Institute's scientists justify their actions through a philosophy that views surface dwellers as evolutionary dead ends, humans who have been so degraded by radiation and hardship that they're no longer capable of rebuilding civilization. They see themselves as humanity's true heirs, the only people with the knowledge and resources necessary to restore the world to its former glory. The story of the Commonwealth begins on the morning of October 23, 2077, with a scene that mirrors the beginning of the Great War itself. A suburban family, husband, wife, and infant son, goes about their morning routine in the peaceful community of Sanctuary Hills, unaware that this will be the last normal day of their lives. The family's patriarch, who will become known as the sole survivor, is a military veteran, adjusting to civilian life in the prosperous pre-war world. Their spouse is a lawyer, representing the educated professional class that formed the backbone of pre-war American society. Together, they embody the American dream at its peak, young, successful, optimistic about the future, and completely unprepared for what's about to happen. When the nuclear warning sirens begin to wail, the family joins their neighbors in a desperate rush to Vault 1011, one of the Vault-Tec facilities that promises safety from the atomic storm. They arrive just as the first mushroom clouds appear on the horizon, making it through the vault door with seconds to spare. But Vault 111 holds secrets that its residents don't suspect. This is not a simple shelter, but another of Vault-Tec's experiments in human manipulation. The Vault's true purpose is to test cryogenic preservation technology. The residents are told they're being decontaminated, but they're actually being frozen in suspended animation for an indefinite period. The sole survivor and their family enter their cryogenic pods, expecting to sleep for a few years at most, but they actually remain frozen for over 2 centuries. The sole survivor's awakening comes not from the end of their intended preservation period, but from a crisis that forces their early revival. They witness the murder of their spouse and the kidnapping of their infant son, but are unable to prevent either tragedy before being refrozen. When they finally emerge from their pod permanently, they find themselves alone in an empty vault, the sole survivor of an experiment that claimed the lives of everyone they knew. The world that greets the sole survivor is both familiar and alien. The basic geography of the Boston area remains recognizable, but 2 centuries of neglect and radiation have transformed the landscape into something strange and dangerous. Familiar landmarks still stand, but they're now inhabited by mutated creatures and desperate survivors who've adapted to life in the ruins. One of the first groups the sole survivor encounters in the Commonwealth is the Minutemen, a militia organization that takes its inspiration from the colonial-era defenders of Massachusetts. The Minutemen represent the idealistic hope that ordinary people can band together to protect their communities and build a better future, but they also embody the fragility of such grassroots organizations in the harsh post-war world. At the time of the sole survivor's emergence, the Minutemen are a shadow of their former selves. Once a powerful force that protected settlements throughout the Commonwealth, they've been reduced to a handful of survivors led by Preston Garvey, one of the last remaining officers. A series of disasters and betrayals has destroyed most of their leadership and scattered their forces, leaving the Commonwealth's settlements vulnerable to raiders, mutants, and worse. Preston Garvey represents the best qualities of the Minutemen philosophy: selfless dedication to protecting others, unwavering optimism in the face of overwhelming odds, and a genuine belief that people can work together to create something better than mere survival. But he also carries the weight of the organization's failures, the knowledge that good intentions alone aren't enough to succeed in the wasteland. The sole survivor's involvement with the Minutemen offers the possibility of rebuilding the organization from the ground up. learning from past mistakes while maintaining the idealistic vision that inspired its creation. This involves not just recruiting new members and acquiring better equipment, but also establishing a sustainable system of communication and mutual support between Commonwealth settlements. The Minutemen's approach to governance is fundamentally democratic and decentralized. Rather than imposing a single vision of how communities should be organized, they allow each settlement to develop according to its own needs and preferences, while providing military support and coordination when threats arise. This flexibility is both a strength and a weakness. It allows for local adaptation, but makes large-scale planning and resource allocation difficult. The arrival of the Brotherhood of Steel in the Commonwealth marks a dramatic shift in the region's balance of power. Unlike the humanitarian-focused Eastern chapter that the Lone Wanderer encountered in the capital Wasteland, this Brotherhood is led by Elder Arthur Maxson, a young but hardened leader who represents a return to the organization's traditional values and methods. The Brotherhood arrives in the Commonwealth aboard the Pridewen, a massive airship that serves as both their mobile base of operations and a symbol of their technological superiority. The sight of this pre-war marvel floating through the sky announces to everyone in the region that a new power has entered the game, one with resources and capabilities that far exceed those of local faction. Elder Maxson's Brotherhood is focused on what they see as their core mission, the preservation and control of dangerous technology. They view the Institute's synthetic human research as an abomination that threatens the very definition of humanity, and they're prepared to go to war to prevent the spread of such technology. Their approach is militaristic and uncompromising. They demand the surrender of advanced technology and the destruction of anything they consider too dangerous for civilian use. The Brotherhood's return to traditionalist ideology creates both opportunities and problems for Commonwealth residents. Their military capabilities make them powerful allies against threats like the Institute and supermutant armies, but their authoritarian approach to technology control puts them in conflict with communities that depend on pre-war machinery for survival. The organization's relationship with other factions reflects broader questions about the proper role of military organizations in post-war society. Should groups with superior technology and training use their advantages to impose order on chaotic regions? Can military discipline and hierarchical command structures coexist with democratic governance and individual freedom? The Brotherhood's presence forces these questions to the surface in ways that cannot be ignored. Working in the shadows of Commonwealth society is an organization dedicated to what many consider an impossible cause: the liberation of synthetic humans from Institute control. The railroad, inspired by the historical Underground Railroad that helped enslaved people escape to freedom, operates a network of safe houses and sympathizers who work to help synths escape their creators and establish new identities in the wasteland. The railroad's mission raises fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and humanity. Are synthetic humans truly conscious beings deserving of freedom and self-determination? Or are they simply very sophisticated machines mimicking human behavior? The railroad's members have no doubt about the answer. They've seen synths express fear, hope, love, and all the other emotions that define human experience. The organization operates through a cell structure that protects members from discovery if one of their number is captured or compromised. Safe houses are hidden throughout the Commonwealth, often in locations that appear to be ordinary buildings or ruins. Members communicate through elaborate codes and dead drops, maintaining operational security in the face of Institute surveillance and infiltration. The railroad's leader, a mysterious figure known only as Desdemona, embodies the organization's commitment to its cause. She's sacrificed any chance of a normal life in the wasteland to dedicate herself to synth liberation, and she demands the same level of commitment from her followers. Under her leadership, the Railroad has developed sophisticated techniques for extracting synths from Institute facilities and providing them with new identities and memories. But the Railroad's mission also creates moral dilemmas that have no easy answers. When they help a synth escape, they typically erase its memories and provide it with a completely new identity. This process gives the synth freedom, but it also destroys whatever personality and relationships it had developed during its service to the Institute. Is this liberation or just a different form of mental manipulation? The revelation that drives the Commonwealth story to its climax comes when the sole survivor finally locates their kidnapped son and discovers that he has become father, the current director of the Institute. This reunion is both everything the sole survivor hoped for and nothing like what they expected, as they confront the reality that their infant child has grown into an elderly man who represents everything they've been fighting against. Sean's transformation from kidnapped baby to Institute leader reflects the complex ways that trauma and circumstance can shape individual destiny. Taken from his parents as an infant, he was raised by Institute scientists who saw him not as a child, but as a valuable genetic resource. His pre-war DNA, uncontaminated by radiation, made him the perfect template for the Institute's synth research program. Growing up in the Institute's sterile environment, surrounded by scientists who viewed surface dwellers as evolutionary failures, Sean developed a worldview that sees his work as humanity's salvation. He genuinely believes that the Institute's research represents the best hope for rebuilding civilization, and he can't understand why his parents would oppose their noble mission. The meeting between the sole survivor and father forces both characters to confront uncomfortable truths about family, loyalty, and moral responsibility. The sole survivor must grapple with the fact that their child has become someone they can barely recognize, while Sean must consider the possibility that his life's work has been built on morally questionable foundations. This confrontation becomes a microcosm of the larger conflicts that define the post-war world. It's not enough to simply defeat the Institute through military force. The sole survivor must also wrestle with questions about the proper relationship between scientific progress and human values, the responsibility that comes with advanced technology, and the price of survival in a hostile world. The climax of the Commonwealth story forces the sole survivor to make a choice that will determine not just their own fate, but the future of an entire region. The various factions they've encountered, the Minutemen, the Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad, and even the Institute itself, each offer different visions of what post-war society should become. The Institute represents the path of technological supremacy, using advanced science to solve humanity's problems while maintaining strict control over dangerous knowledge. Their vision of the future is clean, efficient, and orderly, but it requires the subjugation or elimination of anyone who doesn't meet their standards of genetic purity or intellectual capability. The Brotherhood of Steel offers military order and technological control, promising to protect humanity from the dangers of uncontrolled scientific advancement. Their approach emphasizes duty, discipline, and the preservation of essential knowledge, but it also requires the surrender of individual freedom to collective security. The Railroad champions individual liberty and the rights of artificial beings, arguing that consciousness deserves protection regardless of its origins. Their vision emphasizes freedom and self-determination, but it struggles with practical questions about governance and resource allocation in a dangerous world. The Minutemen represent democratic idealism and community self-defense, believing that ordinary people can work together to create a better future without surrendering their autonomy to higher authorities. Their approach is hopeful and inclusive, but it requires constant vigilance and cooperation to maintain. The choice between these factions becomes more than just a military decision. It's a philosophical statement about the kind of world the sole survivor wants to help create. Each path forward offers benefits and drawbacks, advantages and moral compromises that reflect the complex realities of post-war survival. The destruction of the Institute, regardless of which faction accomplishes it, marks the end of one chapter in the Commonwealth story and the beginning of another. The question remains whether the region's residents will use their newfound freedom to build something better, or whether they'll simply find new ways to repeat the conflicts and mistakes of the past. 9 years have passed since the events in the Commonwealth, and our story now takes us to the furthest point in the Fallout timeline, the year 2296. We find ourselves once again in the ruins of California, where the post-war world continues its slow and often painful process of rebuilding and redefinition. Deep beneath the Mojave Desert, in a complex of underground vaults that represents one of Vault-Tech's most ambitious social experiments, lives Lucy McLean. Lucy is the embodiment of Vault optimism, cheerful, idealistic, and completely convinced that the values and lifestyle of underground society represent the best of human civilization. She spent her entire life in Vault 33, one of 3 interconnected vaults that have maintained their populations through carefully managed exchanges and interactions. Vault 33 appears to be everything that Vault-Tech promised their customers: a clean, safe, prosperous community where American values have been preserved and nurtured through the dark centuries of surface chaos. The residents live comfortable lives, work meaningful jobs, and participate in a democratic society that seems to embody the best aspects of pre-war America. But like so many Vault experiments, the reality behind Vault 33 is far more complex and disturbing than its inhabitants realize. The 3-vault complex, Vaults 31, 32, and 33, was designed as a long-term study in social engineering and corporate governance. The residents of Vault 33 believe they're preparing to eventually return to the surface and rebuild civilization, but they're actually unwitting participants in an experiment designed to create the perfect corporate workforce. Lucy's worldview is shattered when raiders attack during a wedding celebration, killing several residents and kidnapping her father, Hank McLean, who serves as the Vault's overseer. This act of violence forces Lucy to confront the reality that the surface world is not the empty wasteland she was taught to expect, but a place where people live, struggle, and sometimes resort to desperate measures to survive. Driven by love for her father and a sense of duty instilled by her Vault upbringing, Lucy makes the decision to venture to the surface for the first time in her life. Her journey becomes both a physical quest to rescue her father and a psychological odyssey that challenges everything she believes about human nature, civilization, and the proper way to live in a post-nuclear world. On the surface of the post-war world, in the sun-baked wastes of the Mojave Desert, wanders a figure who embodies both the horror and the dark humor of post-nuclear survival. The Ghoul, as he's known to those who encounter him, is a bounty hunter whose scarred and radiation-ravaged appearance tells the story of over 2 centuries of survival in the harshest environment imaginable. But the Ghoul's story begins not in the wasteland, but in the glamorous world of pre-war Hollywood, where he was known as Cooper Howard, a movie star who specialized in westerns and action films. Cooper represented the best of pre-war American masculinity: handsome, confident, and seemingly invincible. His films celebrated the frontier spirit and the triumph of good over evil, providing audiences with escapist entertainment that helped them forget about the growing tensions of the atomic age. Cooper's transformation from movie star to wasteland survivor is one of the most tragic stories in the Fallout universe. Present at a children's birthday party when the bombs fell, he watched the world end in nuclear fire while trying to protect his young daughter. The radiation exposure that followed slowly transformed him into a ghoul. His smooth skin replaced by scarred and peeling flesh, his movie star good looks replaced by the horrific visage of the Walking Dead. But Cooper's transformation went beyond the physical. The man who once embodied heroic ideals became a cynical survivor who trusts no one and expects the worst from every situation. His pre-war optimism has been replaced by a grim understanding of human nature that comes from centuries of witnessing betrayal, cruelty, and desperation. As the Ghoul, Cooper has developed a reputation as one of the wasteland's most effective bounty hunters. His centuries of experience have given him skills and knowledge that few can match, while his ghoulish appearance strikes fear into the hearts of his targets. He's become a legend in the post-war world, a figure who represents both the possibility of survival and the price that such survival demands. Yet beneath the Ghoul's cynical exterior lies a remnant of the man Cooper once was. His search for his lost family provides the emotional core of his story, driving him to continue existing in a world that has taken everything he once valued. His journey intersects with Lucy's in ways that challenge both characters' understanding of heroism, morality, and the meaning of humanity, in a world where such concepts are constantly being redefined. The Brotherhood of Steel continues to play a significant role in the politics of the post-war West, though the organization has evolved considerably since its founding in the aftermath of the Great War. By 2296, the Brotherhood has established itself as a major power throughout the former United States, with chapters operating from coast to coast, and a military force that rivals any faction in the wasteland. The Brotherhood's mission remains fundamentally unchanged. They seek to preserve and control advanced technology, believing that such power should be kept out of the hands of those who might misuse it. But their methods and philosophy have adapted to the realities of a world where technology is becoming increasingly widespread and difficult to control. Maximus, a young Brotherhood initiate, represents both the organization's enduring appeal and its internal contradictions. Recruited from the wasteland as a child, he's been raised to believe in the Brotherhood's noble mission of protecting humanity from the dangers of uncontrolled technology. His training has given him skills in combat and engineering that make him valuable to the organization, but it's also instilled in him a rigid worldview that struggles to accommodate the complexities of post-war society. The Brotherhood's approach to the wasteland has become increasingly militaristic and authoritarian over the years. They view themselves as the rightful inheritors of pre-war military authority, with both the right and the responsibility to impose order on the chaos of post-nuclear society. Their power armor and energy weapons give them a significant advantage over most wasteland factions, but their technology also isolates them from the communities they claim to protect. Maximus's journey forces him to confront the contradictions between the Brotherhood's idealistic rhetoric and their often harsh methods. He encounters wasteland communities that have thrived without Brotherhood protection, individuals who use technology responsibly without military oversight, and situations where the Brotherhood's rigid doctrines provide no clear guidance. The evolution of the Brotherhood reflects broader questions about the role of military organizations in post-war society. As technology becomes more widespread and communities become more sophisticated, the Brotherhood's traditional role as guardians of dangerous knowledge becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. the organization must adapt or risk becoming irrelevant to the world it seeks to protect. Perhaps the most shocking revelation of the Fallout television series is the fate of the New California Republic, the democratic government that once seemed to represent the best hope for post-war civilization. Shady Sands, the NCR's capital and the community that grew from the humble farming village first encountered by the Vault Dweller, has been destroyed in a nuclear explosion that occurred in 2277. The destruction of Shady Sands represents more than just the loss of a single city. It's the shattering of the dream that democracy could survive and flourish in the post-nuclear world. The NCR had grown from a small farming community into a major regional power, proving that people could work together to create something larger and more enduring than mere survival. Its destruction raises questions about whether such achievements are sustainable in a world where a single individual with access to nuclear weapons can undo decades of progress. The circumstances surrounding Shady Sands' destruction reveal the deep personal and political connections that link the various factions of the post-war world. The attack was not the result of foreign invasion or random catastrophe, but of decisions made by individuals whose stories intersect with the broader narrative of post-war civilization. Moldava, a scientist who has survived from the pre-war era, represents the remnants of the NCR's intellectual and political leadership. Her efforts to rebuild civilization through the application of advanced technology echo the themes that have run throughout the Fallout series, but they also raise questions about the proper relationship between scientific progress and democratic governance. The NCR's collapse doesn't mean the end of democratic ideals in the post-war world, but it does suggest that such ideals are more fragile than their supporters might have hoped. The communities that survive the Republic's destruction must decide whether to try to rebuild what was lost or to forge entirely new paths forward. The television series provides the most complete picture yet of Vault-Tec's true agenda and the scope of their influence on the post-war world. The company's Vault experiments, which seemed like isolated incidents of corporate cruelty, are revealed to be part of a much larger plan for the future of human civilization. Vault-Tec's ultimate goal was never simply to profit from the sale of fallout shelters, or even to conduct scientific experiments on human subjects. Instead, the company sought to position itself as the architect of post-war society, using the chaos and destruction of nuclear war as an opportunity to rebuild civilization according to their own vision of corporate efficiency and technological progress. The Vault experiments were designed to test different approaches to social organization and governance, with the goal of identifying the most effective methods for controlling large populations. The successful experiments would provide templates for post-war communities, while the failures would serve as cautionary examples of what to avoid. But Vault-Tec's plans went beyond simple social engineering. The company also sought to control the timing and scope of nuclear war itself, manipulating global politics to ensure that the atomic apocalypse would occur when and how they wanted it to. This level of control would allow them to protect their most valuable assets while ensuring that potential competitors were eliminated. The revelation of Vault-Tec's ultimate plan recontextualizes much of the post-war history that has unfolded throughout the Fallout series. The various factions and conflicts that have shaped the wasteland are revealed to be, at least in part, the result of corporate manipulation and social engineering on a massive scale. Yet the plan's ultimate failure also demonstrates the limits of such manipulation. Despite Vault-Tec's vast resources and careful planning, human nature has proven too complex and unpredictable to be fully controlled. The communities that have emerged in the post-war world have developed their own values, goals, and methods of organization, often in ways that contradict or subvert the company's original intentions. As we reach the end of our journey through the Fallout timeline, from the corporate boardrooms of pre-war America to the irradiated deserts of the post-apocalyptic future, certain themes emerge that bind these stories together across the centuries. These are the ideas and questions that define not just the Fallout universe, but our own understanding of human nature, technology, and the price of progress. The most famous theme, of course, is the one stated at the beginning of every Fallout game: war never changes. This simple phrase encapsulates a fundamental truth about human nature, that despite technological advancement and social evolution, people continue to fight over resources, ideologies, and territory, just as they always have. The weapons change, the scale of destruction increases, but the underlying motivations remain constant. Yet the Fallout series also suggests that while war never changes, people do. We see this in the communities that emerge from the ashes of the old world, in the individuals who choose cooperation over conflict, and in the slowly growing networks of trade and communication that connect distant settlements. The wasteland is harsh and dangerous, but it's also a place where new forms of civilization can take root and flourish. The relationship between technology and humanity forms another central theme throughout the series. Pre-war America's faith in technological solutions ultimately led to global destruction, but technology also provides many of the tools that post-war survivors use to rebuild their lives. The question becomes not whether technology is good or evil, but how it should be controlled and by whom. Each faction in the Fallout universe represents a different answer to this question. The Brotherhood of Steel believes that technology should be controlled by those with the knowledge and discipline to use it responsibly. The Institute argues that scientific advancement should be pursued regardless of moral concerns. The NCR tries to integrate technology into democratic institutions, while groups like Caesar's Legion reject it entirely as a source of corruption and weakness. The world of Fallout is ultimately a story about legacy, the legacy of the past's mistakes and the legacy that each generation leaves for the future. The Great War serves as the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fragility of civilization, but it's also the starting point for new forms of human organization and achievement. The various communities we encounter throughout the series each represent different approaches to dealing with this legacy. Some, like the Enclave, seek to restore the pre-war world exactly as it was, viewing the intervening centuries as an unfortunate interruption in the natural order. Others, like Caesar's Legion, reject pre-war civilization entirely and try to build something completely new from the ruins. Most communities fall somewhere between these extremes, trying to preserve the best of the old world while adapting to the realities of the new. They use pre-war technology and knowledge where it's helpful, but they also develop new customs, institutions, and ways of life that reflect their unique circumstances and challenges. The wasteland itself becomes a character in these stories, scarred by radiation and littered with the debris of a fallen civilization, but also slowly healing as nature reclaims abandoned spaces and new forms of life emerge from the contaminated soil. The landscape tells the story of destruction and renewal, serving as both a warning about the consequences of past choices and a promise that life finds a way to continue even in the most hostile environment. Perhaps most importantly, the Fallout universe suggests that the future is not predetermined by the mistakes of the past. Each generation has the opportunity to make different choices, to learn from previous failures, and to build something better than what came before. The wasteland is full of second chances and new beginnings, places where individuals and communities can reinvent themselves and chart new courses toward the future. As our long journey through the Fallout timeline comes to an end, we're left with images that capture both the darkness and the light of the post-nuclear world. There's the vault dweller walking alone into the wasteland, carrying the hopes of their community but cut off from everything they once knew. There's the chosen one standing in the ruins of the Enclave oil rig, having prevented a second apocalypse through courage and determination. We see the lone wanderer activating Project Purity, giving clean water to the capital wasteland at great personal cost. The courier stands at Hoover Dam, their choices determining the fate of entire civilizations. The sole survivor emerges from the Institute's destruction, having confronted their own child and chosen between competing visions of humanity's future. And finally, there's Lucy McLean, stepping out of her vault into the bright sunlight of the Mojave Desert, her optimism intact despite everything she's learned about the harsh realities of the post-war world. Her journey represents the eternal human capacity for hope, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today if we're willing to work for it. These stories remind us that even in the darkest times, even when civilization seems to have collapsed completely, human beings continue to dream, to build, to create meaning from chaos. The Fallout universe is ultimately optimistic, despite its apocalyptic setting, suggesting that as long as people survive, there's always the possibility of redemption and renewal. The wasteland may be dangerous and unforgiving, but it's also a place of infinite possibility. Every ruined building might contain valuable resources or useful technology. Every encounter with other survivors might lead to friendship, trade, or new opportunities. Every dawn brings the chance to make choices that could change the world for the better. So as you drift off to sleep, let yourself imagine the wasteland not as a place of desolation, but as a frontier of hope. Picture the caravan routes that connect distant settlements, the campfires where travelers share stories and news, the workshops where clever individuals turn scrap metal into useful tools. Think of the gardens where people grow food in irradiated soil, the schools where children learn to read from salvaged books, the hospitals where doctors heal the sick with whatever supplies they can find. The Fallout universe teaches us that civilization is not a fixed achievement, but an ongoing process, something that must be built and rebuilt with each generation. It's not the buildings or the technology that make us civilized. It's the choices we make about how to treat each other, the values we uphold even when they're difficult to maintain, and the hope we nurture even in the darkest times. In the end, that's what makes the Fallout series so enduring and meaningful. It's not just about surviving the apocalypse, but about what comes after, how we pick up the pieces, how we learn from our mistakes, and how we build a better tomorrow from the ashes of yesterday. The wasteland may be harsh, but it's also full of people who refuse to give up, who continue to believe that the future can be brighter than the past. Rest now and dream of the wasteland, not as a place of ending, but as a place of beginning. Dream of the communities that will rise from the ruins, the friendships that will form across the irradiated landscapes, and the hope that will never die, as long as human beings continue to believe in the possibility of a better world. The war may never change, but we can, and in that simple truth lies all the hope the world needs.